Okay, so Marta, you've been here for more than 10 years and experienced firsthand all the changes. So how has the Korean startup and innovation scene evolved in the last years?
Korean startup scene has been evolving very, very fast. I think it kind of replicates the miracle on River Han when several decades ago when Korean economy started from absolutely zero and boomed within a few decades into one of the top economies in the world. And that's pretty much happening the same in the new technology scene. From having absolutely non-existent ecosystem to having thousands of startups and some really significant startups that have been achieving really great things, both here on the local market, but also regionally and around the world.
How would you describe the Korean startup scene today? And what are some of its unique points, like your impression, but also what you heard from other startups or stakeholders in your network, like positives and negatives?
Korean startup scene, especially compared to the European one, is very government-centered and government-driven. So it kind of depends on the government, on the ministry's decisions at the beginning of each year, in which industries, in which direction investments are going to be placed. You have to remember that a large chunk of the investments that VCs place here on the startups comes from government grants that they get. So it's very driven by the central authorities. There, on the industry side, I think there's really very interesting technological developments in Korea, and Korea has a really great academic backbone where all these ideas evolve. There's a lot of university spin-offs happening. I would definitely watch the AI and biotech scene here because they're very exciting. Obviously, fintech and e-commerce, but also mobility and robotics are really breaking up, and it's really fun to see some really incredible stuff coming from these little startups. And they are an example of good collaboration between the ecosystem players, where they got the support from the universities, they got the support from the government, but they were still allowed to have their voice and evolve in a direction that was good and healthy for them.
If you think that COVID-19 has somehow influenced how the startup scene is evolving.
So COVID-19 obviously has affected everybody everywhere around the world. Pre-COVID, Korea and I guess Korea, not only startups, but the Korean working system was very against remote work, against video calls, against, doing things digitally. It was considered unprofessional. But because of COVID-19, we obviously couldn't have offline events. So that made us and made the startup scene kind of jump into having online events, to the point that some of the event platforms developed their own proprietary technology to run those online events, to help the Korean startups who are not very comfortable with using Zoom or Hopin or other technologies to still be able to hold professional online events. I think that definitely has opened the doors. Like, there's a big push and a big investment drive right now for the Untitled, which in Konglish means remote technologies. And there's going to be more and more trends in that direction. A few of the younger startups, more and more, I would say, modern and more driven to be more modern in their team culture, have introduced work from home and remote work. So you see people even traveling to places like Jeju, where they, stay, have fun, but also are able to work from various co-working spaces by the beach or something like that.
Recently you went to Jeju.
I did. I spent a month in Jeju with my team. We worked for a month from Jeju. We discovered the startup scene there, which was very exciting. You would think Jeju is just a tourist paradise, but no, it has so much to offer for startups and for entrepreneurs, and it was really, really fun.
could you give a quick overview of the main innovation hotspots, like some areas here in Korea, and maybe how they are connected, if they are connected?
They are and aren't. So the few innovation spots, I'll start with the big main one, which is obviously Seoul. But even within Seoul, you have a few districts which kind of specialize in their own thing. So the traditional startup hub is in Gangnam, where you have most of the investment companies. A lot of the accelerators are also based there. So that also means that a lot of startups flock around there, like Daehaknero and stuff like that. The next one is also in Seoul, is in Seongsu, which is more of the impact-oriented, social impact-oriented theme. You also have Gongdo, nearby from here, where you have this whole startup hub. So fintech is in Yeouido. So that's kind of covers the Seoul. But then you have outside Seoul, you have Pangyo, which is like the Silicon Valley of Korea, which, at least trying to be. But it also has a lot of the companies like Neighbors based there, but a lot of government centers as well for supporting SMEs and startups. And then also in Gyeonggi-do, you have Incheon. Especially Songdo, where the Incheon government is really investing tons and tons of money to kind of build a startup hub. And it's a really good place because it's also surrounded by various public institution offices, as well as universities, so biotech cluster as well, so it's a pretty interesting place. The next one is Busan. Busan traditionally is supposed to be specializing in blockchain. It was affirmed by the government as the blockchain center of Korea.
Good to know.
there was like a rivalry between Busan and Jeju, because Jeju also wanted to be a blockchain center, but they lost. It's again politics. Yeah, and so that's in Busan. Busan is pretty fun. Also a lot of travel tech companies coming from there as well. And then I would also put names Daejeon mostly because it's around KAIST and a few other universities. So like I said, the universities have a very big force in driving new technologies. So Daejeon has been kind of on the forefront of that. And last but not least, my personal favorite, Jeju. Which you would be surprised, but it has a lot of innovative startups, and the authorities there are really making an effort. The unique thing about that, it's a regulatory sandbox. So because Jeju is an independent governance body, it can set up laws that are independent of the mainland laws. So that allows especially fintech startups, but also drones, like mobility startups, to kind of use Jeju as a really great test bed.
Okay, so this is more about the Korean side. Now let's talk a bit about what opportunities there are for foreign startups, and then the second part will be insider tips, how they can navigate the scene. And so for now, maybe what are opportunities for foreign startups here in Korea?
So I would start with saying that compared to European markets, Korean startup scenes, the Korean market is really hard to penetrate, especially if you don't have prior experience, prior knowledge, and most importantly, personal connections and network. That being said, there are ways to gain those capabilities. There's more and more inbound programs run both by the government as well as corporate institutions that are for foreign startups that are interested into tapping into the Korean startup scene, and they help you build a go-to-market strategy, make a good product market fit, as well as establish a legal entity here, recruit talent, and mostly meet experts that will help you and support you in expanding your business here in Korea. Another way is tapping into those budding communities. Seoul Startups is one of the places where you can go. Anybody can join, ask questions. There's, like I said, thousands of people that are more than happy to jump in and offer you their experience, their insights, because they've already been in your shoes. There are tons of foreigners who have established a business here in Korea. I would say when you're establishing an entity here, you should have a Korean representative that will cover the admin stuff, the legalities, which without the knowledge, not only the knowledge of Korean language, but also without the knowledge of the Korean business culture, it's really, really hard to navigate and understand and do it in a correct and an efficient way. And most importantly, also during business meetings, there is much bigger comfort from a lot of your potential partners when they know that you're coming along with someone who speaks Korean and who will be able to support the communication. Because if they're forced to just speak English all through the meeting and do the communication only in English, they shut down, and they might, just because of that, they might not pursue the project because they're just overwhelmed with the fact that they will have to do it in a foreign language.
Right.
So you have to keep those things in mind. But like I said, if it's a good fit, there are a lot of industries that I mentioned before that are really evolving greatly here in Korea, are dynamically expanding. And if you think that your product is competitive for this market, go ahead, go for it. But before you do, make sure you do your homework, and also make sure that you're ready to localize your product. And by localize, I mean not just translate. That's the bare minimum. You have to really localize it for the Korean market, because otherwise it's never going to adapt.
And then if there is any other tips you would like to share with people curious about the Korean ecosystem, I think we can put them all together in one question, and you just...
Yeah, so for sure, Korean startups, and like I said, tap into the communities, with Seoul Startups being one of them, seoulstartups.com. But also you take advantage of the multiple chamber of commerces that are here in Korea. They have really great networks. Some of them have really great networks, and their job is to support entrepreneurs and businesses that are looking into expanding into the Korean market. So definitely.
And sweet snacks.
And yes, so, of course, and definitely take advantage of them. At the same time, I would also be open to, like I said, anything that comes your way when it comes to the business culture here, which can be a little bit overwhelming for some, and as well as getting to getting someone, a Korean person, to either be helping you establish your presence here in Korea, or just be a representative of your company here in Korea. Because all by yourself, it's possible. There are people who have done it, but it's just so much effort and so much stress that it might not be worth it.